Billy Bontang.
Chill.
Billy
That's
Bontang.
vibe, yo.
Here we go. Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Jesse, we're back again.
Billy, I'm so ready for this.
Well, yeah. Well, let's get into it then, yo. Welcome to the Where's Now podcast.
Don't get too excited. Wait.
Oh.
Okay, now you can go.
That's real. I really needed to wait for that.
We just had to feel that. I don't even know what that's called, but I guess it's like an organ roll or something. I don't know what you would call that. But we were
tight.
definitely. I was not going to let you start before we heard that.
And I almost missed that. Yeah, for real talk. Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Well, yo, welcome to the Where Is Now podcast. I'm Billy Bunton, and my partner is Jesse Freeston on the other side of the screen. The Where Is Now
Or
podcast.
microphone.
Every time we get together, we pick a person, a movement, an idea, and we talk about its role in human history and in progressing us to the place that we are now. And it's been a lot of fun, Jesse. We're on episode 8, man. Can you believe that? Is that true?
I can.
That is
Yeah,
true.
I can believe it. I can totally believe it. It feels. I'm
Really?
feeling more like it should be like episode 10, 11, somewhere around there. That's how I'm feeling.
We should pump out more. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
You're saying
I mean, we could increase production, but I'm just saying I feel my comfort level is actually probably more
okay.
around an episode 10, episode 11 kind of thing. Yeah, I'm feeling
That's
very
what's up.
comfortable for episode 8. I feel like I'm ahead. My progress is
Good.
ahead.
Yeah, same, man. I feel like we've progressed, man. I can see it. I can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And things are changing clearly because you're usually in a different background. This looks like you're in a new place. Where are you, Jack?
I'm in a totally different place. I'm like 3,000 miles from where I usually am. So I'm no longer. I'm not in Montreal today. I'm on Wet'suwet'en territory, also known as Northern British Columbia, on the west coast of North America, Canada. And yeah, I'm here to continue a project that I've been working on for a couple of years with some other filmmakers, working with the Wet'suwet'en Nation, working on documentary film projects, as well as pumping out on-time videos as things are happening in this struggle here over the future of their territory and whether or not pipelines are to be constructed on it to move oil and gas from the interior of Canada, the area of the tar sands, if people are familiar with that, to the coast for export to Asia, perhaps the United States, who knows. And
I love it,
I'm
man.
actually in large part here because of the Supreme Court of Canada, or our government's unwillingness to follow some of the rulings of the Supreme Court of Canada. So the reason why this is important is because in a second we're going to get to our topic of today, which is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the Supreme
RBG.
Court, RBG, the recently deceased Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And I'm actually here on this territory where a major Supreme Court victory was won to defend Indigenous sovereignty and Indigenous rights here in Canada, territorial rights, back in 1990. It goes down in history as the Delgamuukw Stay Away Court case. And what was determined in that case is that the government of Canada, when it wanted to give rights for any corporations or anybody to develop any sort of projects on Indigenous territory, that they needed to get approval from the traditional government if it was still active. That is to say, the government, the Indigenous government, the government that was here before the Europeans arrived, if it was still functioning. And I'm in a part of North America right now where that government's still functioning, despite the residential schools, despite all the various attacks on this community. They still have their functioning feast house where they still make decisions about what's supposed to happen on the territory in the traditional way. And
That's crazy. So can I note that? So the Supreme Court of Canada gave a really strong legal nod to this, what you call a traditional government.
exactly. Yeah.
There's no such thing here in this country, I imagine. I mean, I'm no scholar on this, but I think that kind of like, legal status nod seems like it's much further away from being a real thing here.
Yeah, I think I'm very ignorant about the situation for Indigenous sovereignty and territory rights in the United States, but government after government here in Canada, whether they be liberal or conservative, have not put that into place. So long story short, the Canadian government of Justin Trudeau is in total violation of the Canadian Supreme Court, and there's no real accountability. The only accountability is the Wet'suwet'en Nation throwing down and putting physical barriers in the way of the machinery to build their pipeline, and then having solidarity actions happen across the country, which happened in February of this year. We had the biggest railway shutdown in the history of Canada, where there was blockades across the country and basically shut down large sections of the Canadian economy for almost a month. And then the only thing that brought it to an end really was COVID.
And these are solidarity actions specifically in support of the people of this territory.
Yeah, exactly.
Indigenous people of this territory.
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
Yeah, it's enlightened solidarity too, right? Because it's saying, you know, it's the concept of as long as the Wet'suwet'en don't have their rights, none of us have our rights.
Yeah, that's what. Right. So you're out here to document the movement right on the territory. I guess for how long? How long are you going to be there?
Not sure. One-way ticket.
But Jesse,
I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I've been saying, look, I've known this man for 12 years, I think, right? It's Obama election, so it's around 12 years. Right. And I've always called you an international man of mystery, bro. You've seen more of the world, and you've seen it in a way that's really interesting. And for, you know, I'm sure you spend some time and enjoy the sights and things like this. But every time I hear about you or where you are, it's always somewhere else. There's always some weird background noise, you know, and because you're somewhere nutty. And even in the middle of COVID, yo, early like in April or whatever, Jesse's like, hey, I'm on my way to Wuhan. You know, gonna go document some stuff. And so this right here, right now.
Yeah, for the record, that's not a real story.
That's not a real story. That's not. But right now you're.
I only went to Wuhan on Tinder.
That's right. That's another thing, by the way, which we gotta get into.
That's a whole other thing. We can get to that another time. But when Tinder opened up their global passport, I took advantage to go visit some places and talk to some people that I would never normally.
Who does that?
Talk to in Wuhan.
Who does that? Let me tell you, when Tinder goes international or whatever, I hit New York. I think I hit California. Jesse went to North Korea. Jesse starts hollering at
Pyongyang. I swiped right on the one woman in Pyongyang and
the
Tinder.
One and you know that's Kim Jong-un.
She never swiped right. She never swiped right. She never swiped right on me.
That was actually Kim Jong-un. And now
I guess maybe it was if he's alive or whatever.
Well, that was a while back though. Anyway,
that was a while back. Yeah. Saudi Arabia, Tehran.
So you're in quarantine right now though, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I'm in quarantine. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying.
I'm waiting for some test results so I can get out on the territory and start shooting. Shooting with a camera. Sorry, just to be clear. Yeah. Start filming. You know, Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government here in Canada called pipeline construction an essential service, declared that during COVID, said, at this time when nobody's even driving anywhere, and, you know, it's like, we really need to build another fossil fuel pipeline. It's essential, you know, at the level of nurses and grocery workers and farmers and stuff.
And here's what's interesting, because to most Americans' lights, particularly right now, Justin Trudeau's probably a liberal bastion or more than that. He's supposedly, in terms of his stance on modern day feminism and racism, even though some things have come to light with didn't he do some blackface or some shit when he was a kid?
Yeah,
he was younger.
We could turn this whole episode into
I know I don't want to get into that, but I just
want all the misunderstandings of Justin Trudeau and who he really is. But
he's supposedly some really good guy. He's the guy we would wish we had as a presidential candidate here, and this is why I think a focus, and I know you agree, a focus on actors and individuals is a little bit off base, a little bit of a distraction, because there's so many structural things, there's so many big ideas that need to be addressed and are foundational, and what Donald Trump is a symptom of something, and something bigger, something that will still be in need of repair after we're rid of Donald Trump, and I hope we're rid of him sooner. But
and everything gets, I mean, it's crazy. There was the news about the Pentagon having misappropriated that $1 billion of COVID funding that came out recently, and everybody's like, Trump's Pentagon, blah blah blah. It's like, no man, the Pentagon does this. Like, this is the Pentagon. This is your Pentagon. Like, this is way beyond Trump. This is not Trump. You know, these guys do this all the time. They take most of your money. Like, the Pentagon takes most of your tax money and spends it on ridiculous things. You know, and that's one of the major things that's happening every day, Democrat, Republican, whatever, in the United States. And it's like, Trump's Pentagon, look what Trump did again. Like, you know. Yeah.
The narratives on the ground are so people oriented. And I know that's one of the, we'll get there eventually. But even as we talk about RGB, it's important to recognize like her as an individual and her role and her thought process and values. But the systems are really the focus. I don't know.
Yeah, I think with RBG we can look at how the system works and how she managed to play a major role in getting some really fundamental things changed in her lifetime, and look at the ways in which she did it and stuff like that. So to get into it, first of all, her nickname that she's become kind of a famous figure. Some would say a feminist icon. Some would say it's broader than that, in terms of standing up for just the idea of equal rights for all people. Is the Notorious RBG. Obviously taken off of Notorious B.I.G., who's from
Brooklyn.
And so when Billy's also from Brooklyn, for those who aren't familiar yet, and I just want to say that there's this fascinating moment where, obviously when you call this 80-something-year-old tiny white woman judge character who is pretty soft-spoken and stuff, and you compare her to a braggadocious, over-the-top rapper like Notorious B.I.G., the size difference between the two of them, he's probably 2.5 times heavier than she is, I'm sure was, so there's like right. Obviously all these contrasts. But one of the interesting things, so she's interviewed about this, and she says, well, actually we do have things in common, and there's this eruption of laughter, right? Like, ha ha ha, like I was making a joke. She's like, no, we're both from Brooklyn.
Yeah exactly.
I don't know, and
that's like,
what did you think about that?
I think it's hilarious. Why the laughter? I think
why the laughter?
We pick two things, and it's especially the most superficial, useless things. We pick things like height, and as an artist, I recognize like silhouette is important. When you look at someone's silhouette, we immediately make a ton of assumptions about their capacity to kill us. Versus these are sort of really base things that are rooted in our evolutionary history. So we go, I don't know, skin color without a doubt, height, silhouette. And so you look at these two and no, there's nothing. No, they're both from Brooklyn. They're both human.
And they're both wordsmiths.
They're both wordsmiths. Yeah, exactly. Like, we can get crazy. We can go for days. They both have to eat several times a day. You know what I mean? Perhaps different amounts. You know what I mean?
Different amounts, perhaps. Yeah.
So we can go on for days, but yes, they're both brilliant wordsmiths, and so that that's awesome.
She's from Flatbush. What does Flatbush mean to you? What does every neighborhood in Brooklyn have like an identity? Would you think about something when you hear Flatbush? Like what?
When I hear Flatbush, I think of the taxis, yo. Flatbush. That's a big thing when you get on. Now I don't know if that's a thing anymore, right? I don't know if that was a thing.
Oh, because it's like a legal taxi line, right?
Exactly.
It's like or an underground taxi line.
Exactly. And it was just people with vans.
So it would just be cheaper. It would be cheaper.
It would be cheaper. It'd be like $1. You'd get on. It'd be $1, and they would take you. So you get on this van, and there'd be like 20 people in the van in the back as well. They're supposed to seat like 8. And then they had a sliding door with a rope on it, so that he's in the driver's seat and the door's over there. So he had a rope, and he'd pull the thing in, and then you just go on this ride and just drop off people. And Flatbush was always.
Oh, the driver would work the door with a rope.
Yeah, because he was by himself for the most part, unless he had. Yeah, sometimes he had another person, okay. But these guys, these people are just hustling, yo.
So we're talking about with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of the 10 most famous residents of Flatbush history. The top 3 are settled, by the way. She's not in the top 3. The top 3 most famous residents of Flatbush are, without a doubt, Mario and Luigi from Mario Brothers and Bugs Bunny. So the creators of all three. So in the Super Mario Brothers movie, they live in Flatbush. And then Bugs Bunny, Mel Blanc, the creator of Bugs Bunny, said he made Bugs Bunny's accent after a Flatbush accent. So these three of the most famous fictional characters of the 20th century, Mario, Luigi, and Bugs Bunny, are all from Flatbush.
I mean, I guess sounds like Bugs Bunny's voice was done after a Brooklyn person. Maybe not. We didn't say his origin story was Brooklyn. That's one. So these are weird. I would pick all 3 of these apart.
All right.
Then the first 2, you're picking that movie as like the representation for like the canon of like Mario Brothers. Like
I mean, you got to take it all in. What, you're gonna say the movie's a liar? Like they just invented
that
this
movie
thing?
Is a liar.
Mario and Luigi are from Flatbush. The game is not clear, right? The game. It's like the game starts.
Where they get
fall
those
from the sky and they're
ridiculous
running.
accents from? Where they get those ridiculous accents from? Over the top.
Well, obviously there's
accents.
There's an Italian connection here.
Gotcha.
So moving on here with RBG, when RBG wanted to get busy and wanted to start having an impact on the world, she went to the ACLU, and she headed up the women's equality team at the ACLU, and from there argued a series of cases at the Supreme Court. I got to do an interview with somebody that I've appreciated in a deep way for a long time, Malik Berznami, who is now a prosecutor for domestic violence cases in San Diego with the District Attorney of San Diego. She wanted to make clear, though, that she's not representing that office in these interviews. She's representing herself. And I met her when she was pursuing a career in journalism. She used her brilliant mind and took her brilliant mind to law school, where she was the old kid in school, as she said, and kicked ass there. And now she's at the DA. And so, I got to interview her about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and particularly in this clip about kind of like the adversity that Ruth Bader Ginsburg went through. This is another theme that we're seeing in all these people. These people that end up doing great things are usually people that face a lot of adversity early on in life and learn lessons through that and build their character through that, and that kind of like tempers the steel that then they show later on.
Whether it was applying for a job right after Cornell when her and Marty got married and they demoted her once they found out she was pregnant, or when she would try to clerk for another great dissenter, Learned Hand, and she'd be highly recommended by former classmates, professors, but they're like, I can't have a woman in my chambers. It was after she graduated, she actually went to Sweden for a comparative law project where she's comparing the legal structures there and here, that I think you kind of see a shift, and she kind of notices what an egalitarian society can look like. It's not until we know better that we do better. And she saw societies could be better. Members of society could be treated equally. And when she started picking those cases for the ACLU, absolutely, I think she did have an agenda on mind, which was equality.
This is another theme, that we're seeing with Rosa Parks, for example. Rosa Parks talked about.
Once you see something, you see better, you know better, you can do better, for sure.
You go live in the future for a bit. You come back and you go, hey, everybody, let's fast forward. There's greater things ahead. Can we just speed this up? And that's how I see, figures like Rosa Parks and RBG. I see them as people that get a view of the future, either by going to Sweden or in a dream, or however it might be, or in Rosa Parks' case, by being on that non-segregated trolley, integrated trolley at work, right on the Federal Air Force Base or whatever it was, that we talked about in the last episode.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a real pillar for her. It was a great way for, we talked about faith and vision and imagination, and like you said, we're going into the future. I think that's key.
So the context of her taking over the equal rights thing at the ACLU was there was this huge push with the feminist movement for the Equal Rights Amendment. So at this point, the amendments to the Constitution, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, which had been brought after the Civil War for the liberation of black people from slavery, were not being interpreted as applying to women. They were being interpreted as applying only on race, as being the major question. And so there was this idea that we need a new amendment, the Equal Rights Amendment, to apply these rights to women, to amend the Constitution. And it failed by a few states. It got very close to passing and it failed. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg comes in and just sort of quietly goes, okay, well, there's another path to this, which is just little by little, we're going to apply the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to sex. And it had been shown that this all-male Supreme Court wasn't necessarily willing to do that on the basis of cases about women and about where women's rights were being trampled. And so she started taking cases where men were being discriminated against based on their sex, but that the basis of this discrimination was a stereotype about women. So it's very interesting. So she brought cases to the Supreme Court about, for example, men's paternity rights, to paternity leave. You know, so this idea was that like only women should be raising kids, and so there's no reason for men to have paternity leave. So she took the case of this nice man whose wife had died, and had like a really young child, like almost a newborn, I think it was, and was not being given any paternity pay. In a situation where if he had been a woman, he would have gotten maternity pay. And so she brings this case. She brings another case, a crazy case in Oklahoma, where the laws were that women over the age of 18 could buy beer, but men only over the age of 21 could buy beer. And the idea was that women are more responsible, they take care of themselves, and there was a lot of drunk driving accidents at the time. And so instead of passing a law against drunk driving or enforcing drunk driving, they decided to pass this law. They decided to set this sex discrimination thing into the law. So she fights. So you can imagine the feminist movement at this time being like, who the hell is this woman?
Yeah.
You know, like, why you're the head of the equal rights, you're the head of the women's equality team at the ACLU, and you're bringing fucking cases about men's rights to buy beer in Oklahoma? Like, this is crazy.
Yeah. But there's an underlying principle there, right? It's not a superficial connection to, not to call it superficial, I got to come up with a better word there. But the point isn't to advance issues relevant to women. The point is to advance an equal principle. And once you secure that, if you can properly secure an equality principle, everyone wins, including women, particularly in a climate where this is kind of like resource scarcity in this case, you know, in a climate where the Supreme Court doesn't listen to these cases that's so backwards on women's rights in general. It's like, this is a tactic we can start to move on in the here and now while we build up the political clout and will to do whatever we have to do next. And it seems to be working. And that's part of why what we remember. I didn't even know about these cases, Jesse. Thank you, man.
Here's what Malik Berznami has to say about it.
She wanted to show men and women should be treated equally under the law. And she followed a step-by-step jurisprudence, which meant one small bite at a time. And she was very strategic in the cases she would choose, similar to the approach that we saw Thurgood Marshall take with a lot of the civil rights cases that came before the court, except now she substituted race for gender. And the brilliant part of how she did this is she knew her audience. She knew who she was talking to. I think the way she went about it was knowing how to pick her battles, whether it was when she was in front of the Supreme Court and choosing cases that would help and serve to educate a panel of 9 men, or whether it was when she was writing her opinions. She was actually more toward the center when she first started, and she really was fair and impartial, because as much as people want the feminist, you also need an officer of the court. So I think a lot of people looking back, hindsight is 2020, and they would realize that there were methods to her lack of madness that was sought after at that moment.
If you're going to play the institutional game, it's a different game than the activist game in some ways. And your credibility in the eyes of these people who, in this case, are sexist, misogynist, men who don't even want women working for them, you know, as clerks. Like, you know, she's trying to convince people who wouldn't accept her on as a clerk because she's a woman. Like, these are people with deeply ingrained things. But if she's going to go this path, if she's going to work on the ACLU's women's equality team and she's going to fight in the court system, she can't be, she has to be very aware of this, and she has to incorporate it as painful as that is, into her practice. And I think it takes this incredible strength that I definitely wouldn't have. Like, I would not be able to take the criticism of people that I agree with. That shit would kill me. Like to have all these feminists that I agree with screaming at me about how and like, I can't be public about, I can't be like, hey, this is just a strategy. I have to educate these sexist men. Like, if she in any way reveals her hand publicly, it ruins the whole game, right? It ruins her hand. So she has to go, like, and I want to go back and like look at the videos to see if she ever like winked at the camera or, you know, like anything like this, kind of like, guys, like, I'm with you, you know. It's like,
yeah,
you know, like, keep yelling at me, and that, you know, keep yelling at me, like this, you know. I need you too. Like, I need you out there screaming.
So what's the challenge here? Because I can see people coming back at this and going, okay, that's nice, and that's a very cool narrative approach, and I actually find it convincing myself, and I need to look. It's making me want to kind of Google and get into her more. But I can also see people saying, oh, that's a clever narrative and a clever way to be, to instantiate yourself and kind of, you know, create your own personal legacy. People will criticize so many black politicians for kind of coming into political prominence and not achieving a set of goals at the standard of the activist community or the black community or whatever that means. And they'll say, be patient, and I'm working on this and that. Like, how do you know that you're dealing with a genuine RBG versus someone else, perhaps?
I mean, it's this is what Malik said, you know, hindsight's 2020 on this stuff. It's hard to know, especially when somebody's rising in power, right? Like, you know, especially when somebody's rising in their own ambition and getting more salary and getting, you know, all these other things. It's really hard to know if they're still in it to win it or not, or to what degree. But at some level, it doesn't matter, because at some level, you kind of have to yell at them anyways. Like, even if you know, like, even if this is your best friend from school and you guys have secret hangouts and they, like, you work out the plan together and blah, 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 you still have to go, you're part of the deal as the activist side or whatever, is still to go outside and scream at them that they're a reformist and that they're not doing enough, because that's going to strengthen their hand to do more. That's going to open more space for them. So it's anyways, and so Malik talked about this.
Even when you had someone like Justice Ginsburg on the bench, inequality still occurred. And the way the court works is they choose which cases to hear and which cries of inequality are going to move forward, or which facets of society we're ready to reform. And the silver lining on that is a lot of that, for example, just with a lot of the recent decisions with trans rights and equal marriage rights, the court, these issues were before the court several times before they were actually heard and argued before the justices. And when they started being heard, it was when people were screaming and yelling for them.
But it's a really complicated thing. So, for example, take Roe v. Wade, right? So she wasn't on the court when Roe v. Wade was decided, which guaranteed women the right to choose whether or not they want to have an abortion. But she, when asked about Roe v. Wade, as somebody who potentially might have to vote, you know, or would vote on abortion-related cases later on, when she was asked about Roe v. Wade, she said she didn't agree with the decision. And her reason for disagreeing with the decision was about process. Is she said that what we've done here is we took the state, which was Texas, which had the most strict anti-abortion laws, and we said these laws aren't correct. So we're wiping out all the anti-abortion laws in the entire country based on this worst case example of Texas. And she said even people who are, her argument was also, her argument was not just in defense of process, in defense of her own credibility, I guess, as this what did Malik call her? Like somebody like an interpreter of laws, and somebody who's doing a job. They're not just there to represent their values and their worldviews. They're supposed to be there doing a job. And so this is how she defends her credibility in certain ways, which then she can then use later. When she has the respect of some of her opponents. Because of her principled stance on things like this, I guess. But in the meantime, you've got women or anybody, men too, who are pro women's right to choose, saying like women are in serious physical danger as they're trying to get themselves abortions illegally. Like people die, there's serious complications, like life is made miserable on the daily right now for all these people because of their lack of access to safe abortion. And you're gonna put like the process of the court above that, so they could delay this another 5 years or something, and who knows what happens during that time. Maybe Ronald Reagan appoints a new justice, and now we don't have the votes, and whatever. And you're gonna put that at risk. You're gonna put all these women, these thousands, or I don't know, hundreds of thousands, I don't know how many women at risk. Their health and safety. What's the answer there? What? Yeah, she's playing the long game. And I don't know. I don't know who's right on that one. It's like she's playing the long game.
That's a charitable.
And we could see it now. Like with the Trump nominee, you could see Roe v. Wade come into question again. And I don't know if Ruth Bader Ginsburg's right in the sense that, like, if they had have passed a better case, if there had been a stronger case, and now we're going to get into something else, which is the perfect case, right? The search for the perfect case. And if you had picked a stronger case to win the abortion rights, would it be stand up stronger in 2021 or whatever when this comes up again? I don't know. Like I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know whether it's worth it to sacrifice another, I don't know how many women and their safety and their basic rights in order to get a stronger case, or do you take it when you have the chance? Like when you're on the side of right, do you just take it however you can get it when you get the chance? These are unsettled,
that's a tough question.
Unsettled questions for me.
Here's my question for you: how that interpretation of her playing the long game on Roe v. Wade, that's your interpretation, or you read that somewhere? That's her description of what her logic was at the time.
Well, I think
probably not, right?
I think she, if I remember correctly, her statements on Roe v. Wade mentioned both things. Was mentioned that like it was bad. I guess the term is jurisprudence. I keep hearing this word. I don't necessarily know how to use it properly. It's bad functioning of the court. Like you shouldn't use the weakest law or the most extreme law and then try that law and then make a decision for the whole country. She had some issue with the process in terms of the credibility of the court and the justices. And then she also said, from a strategic point of view, now thinking as the woman at the ACLU who's trying to pick the perfect cases and blah, 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 she's saying this is not the way you want to win the rights because it'll be weaker. Like it'll be easier to overturn in the future. Yeah,
this is a real thing. The weaker case versus the stronger case. Like the why make a strategy for states to handle a certain issue versus a federal mandate, and which of these is the right choice. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a whole set of political philosophies as well as strategy. And I see people, and so I want to articulate what I think some people might how they might respond. So for instance, Breonna Taylor's killers were recently not given charges. And it's to the dismay of a lot of people, and people are upset because I believe the AG of that state is a black man, and he's being looked at as someone who sold out, and isn't willing to stand up for the right thing here. And how difficult is it to notice if he has a legal point or if he has some broader strategy? Mm-hmm. Will we ever be able to look at this young man 15 years down the line, 30 years down the line, and go, oh, interesting. Yeah. He pulled it off, What do you think? I don't even know if this should even go up as part of this, but I don't know enough.
I don't know enough about the guy and his particular thing. I think my limited experience on Earth in general, is that the RBGs are the exception, and the rule is that people in positions of power are there because of personal ambition, and and that is the number one way to understand their decisions. I think the people who are playing long games with the goals in mind, like an RBG, are the exception. And so I think my general rule is until proven otherwise, I'm just assuming you have some personal ambition reason for making this unpopular decision or whatever it might be.
And as you said, it doesn't really matter much. Our role is the same. Our role should be to scream or to, I don't know, something about screamer I don't like.
Yeah, no, it's true. But we should come up with a better one.
Seems like there's a lack of control there. But yes, it's our role to speak loudly and
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, like I think the screamer, what I mean screamer is like people who are standing primarily or principally or entirely for what is morally right. You know what I mean? Who don't care what the process is, and who don't care about the credibility of the court or the credibility of this particular justice who might later go on to do great things, and we don't want to drag her through the mud now because blah, 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 whatever. People who are just saying, no, this is wrong, this is right, that's it, this is my position based on that, and that's who I'm calling screamers, and that's how I identify myself. And then the perfect case thing is interesting. We were talking about Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks, we know Rosa Parks' name because of a perfect case situation. Otherwise, we would have known the name of Claudette Colvin, who was a 15-year-old black girl who in Montgomery refused to give up her seat to a white person. I think it was like 5 months before Rosa Parks. It became a legal case, but in the process, she got pregnant with a married man, and so it was determined that this is not this can't be the face of our movement for black rights, because there's this other circumstance based in sexism in a lot of ways that
but
is
a political reality nonetheless, just like the political reality of bus segregation and the rest of it. This is a political reality, something to be dealt with, or reality, something to be dealt with. And the question about the strength of the argument is really important. A question about not just the strength of the moral stance, but the strength of the argument, which involves the other side.
Yeah.
When you're having an argument, you must consider that there is another side.
Yeah.
Or at least that's how you argue well. And so, there is anyone who's done a debate or done some sort of a thing like this, you do some preemptive thought about what the other side might say. How would they approach this? How would they strike this down? How would you lose the attention of the groups that you're trying to gain attention from? Yeah. And so, Rosa was the perfect case at the time.
And Rosa Parks herself said, like, it couldn't be Claudette, and first of all, they would have destroyed her. Like, as a 15-year-old to go through that would have been, I can't imagine. All the sexist and racist invective that would have been thrown at her would have been off the charts, I'm sure. The combination of all these things coming together. And for somebody so young,
even now, can you imagine back then?
Yeah.
Even now, she would be making a choice to sign up for some serious pain and trauma, probably for the rest, for as long as that case had the public eye.
But like with today's kind of like intersectional lens, the fact that the NAACP, Rosa Parks, and all these people are not willing to take that on, to also take on this other form of oppression, this sex-based form of oppression. Like in today's terminology, you might even say, "Oh, Rosa Parks is a sexist." The NAACP are sexist because of their lack of courage for fighting both these battles. You know what I mean? Like for saying, no, right now we're going to focus on getting these racist segregation laws and taking those on. We need to find the perfect case. Sorry, Claudette, it's not you, based on some of these other prejudices that are out here. And I don't know. This is an interesting question for me. I hope we're at a stage where
it really is,
where we're like, where the public is ready to handle intersectional fights, right? Where you can say, oh, this person's rights were offended in 2 ways, or like this person is a victim in 2 or 3 ways, and they're all wrong, and we can have that discussion and have that fight. But I have to take, because I didn't live at that time, I have to kind of take their word for it. That Rosa Parks and the NAACP, when they say no, we would not have won with Claudette Colvin as the face.
What you said is right. I think today's politics is less interested in coalition building.
So another question I have is on this front, RBG's, the thing that kind of unifies her life's work, is a fight to make the law neutral on questions of race, gender, sex, sexuality, etc., identity in large part, and I feel like today we're hearing a bit of a different message, which is that government needs to play a role, or society needs to play a role, or government in more specifically, in addressing the inequalities. And how do you do that in a way? How do you pass those laws without having in the laws, in the wording of the law, discrimination based on race, sex, gender, sexuality, etc.? I don't know.
Yeah, it's just a philosophical question. Obviously, the discrimination we're talking about in this case is a purposeful discrimination to resolve a previous wrong. So it's not a discrimination to harm anyone, which has been standard fare for so long. This is going the opposite direction.
Or to protect privileges, to protect access,
exactly.
To protect privileges for the group that's already on top.
Yeah. I see nothing incredibly wrong with, let me rephrase that. I think affirmative action, particularly when it was first, let me rephrase that. I think affirmative action is important. And I think that it needs to be protected. We need to figure out how to do it better. I think that we need to look at different industries and the problems that present themselves in each of those industries differently. I like cultural moves as well. So we're talking in a legal space. Obviously, this is an RBG episode, but I like cultural efforts as well. So, and I've become more interested in cultural efforts of late, because I think it's possible to have one position in terms of our legal understanding, and then also really push the idea that diversity makes groups better, and that if you have some diverse voices in a particular room, whether it's to make a movie or to create the next big thing, these voices will help that product become better. And we're seeing that. I think a lot of companies, they put that out there and herald themselves as being diverse, and that kind of public demonstration of it, I think it annoys some people who have their critiques of that, but it's a sign of a cultural move. It's a sign that culturally they see value in that, and I think that's a good thing, and that had to be fought to have that happen.
Yeah, and there's ways in which you can leverage the cultural movement and then add in some laws that aren't discriminatory in their wording, but that the combination of the two can help address inequalities. So what I mean by that is, like, let's take cultural industries like filmmaking or music or whatever. So in Canada, and to the United States to a lesser degree, but in Canada, a lot of these industries are propped up by government money. So you have these long-standing relationships between production companies, record companies, blah, 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 whatever, and the government funder. And so if there was basically rules like, okay, from now on, you have 10% of the money you get or 20% of the money you get, you have to spend it working with people you haven't worked with before, right? And then that combines with a cultural movement that's saying, you've got some representation issues in your industry, and you better make sure those people represent these groups that are underrepresented. So like and then it's a question of their brand. So it's like they would get dragged through the mud culturally if they didn't use this money that they're getting from the government to hire people. But the law itself wouldn't have to work out this crazy shit about trying to figure out how do you talk about race, how do you talk about sex and gender and sexuality and things like this in a law, and how do you pass that law, and then how long is that law for, and blah, blah, blah. Like when you get into actual laws, it can get a little crazy, and it's not necessarily moving towards, it can, and it also creates resentment, and it also creates a situation where people get the idea when they, in their head, they see and maybe the law shouldn't be responsible for this, but it's unavoidable. You see with affirmative action all the time is this idea of like, you show up, you might be wholly talented enough to be there, but people are looking at you like you're not affirmative action hire or whatever. You're only here because the law puts you here. And that's that, like, or maybe they don't believe it that strongly, but it's floating around in their head somewhere. Oh, let's find out if you really got the chops. Like there's like another level for you. And so it's a way to avoid all these issues that comes with actually putting it in the law.
Those are real things, and those are some of the critiques related to affirmative action. I think what's funny is, and we've said this before, if part of why the last 50 years or 60 years have developed the way that they have, if you actually created systems of justice broadly, a lot of these differences would not exist, especially as they often manifest along racial lines because of this history. But if you have systems of true justice in terms of housing and healthcare and education, and you broke some of these old boy clubs and these systems of like legacy in certain schools, and there's myriad ways that people consolidate and keep power and prevent others from doing so, and that multiplies over generations, where then it becomes necessary to have a more blunt instrument come in and correct things. And if you just had true systems that work to become egalitarian, I think everything would look quite different today. And in that regard, it's been a failure. Does that make sense? In that regard, there have been failed efforts, but it's due to constantly not developing the institutions and the legacy, the policies that would make it a true free and fair country.
I agree with you 100% that, and I'll add to like I think so many of the stereotypes and ideas that racism is built upon are directly tied to economic realities, and that they will be difficult to completely eliminate without addressing some of the economic realities that are beneath them, that are the base on which they are built. And what I mean by that is that
I think that's right.
Is that like I want to live in a world where there's no combination of skin tone mixed with how you talk and how you walk and how you dress that signifies to other people that you are from an impoverished community, because there are no impoverished communities like this. And because I think a lot of these things, when it comes down to ideas around safety and blah, blah, blah. So it's, I think of, or of lack of education, right? Like I think a lot of the dangerous stereotypes have to do are like based around ideas that like this person is either uneducated or dangerous. And
or desperate
and are desperate. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're dangerous because they're desperate. And both those situations can be tied directly to being from an impoverished situation, to coming up in an impoverished situation where you got to be a bit rough. Maybe you don't have to be, but a lot of people make the decision to be rough, like to be as a survival mechanism in that situation. And so
it's facts.
Yeah, so that's the world I want to live in. So I was talking about with a couple older white folks about, we were talking about internal racism and things like this, and they were confiding in me that like, yeah, particularly when it comes to Black and Indigenous people, they were talking about, yeah, if it's late at night and I see a group of young Black men walking towards me on the street and I'm alone or whatever, they're describing these situations, yeah, my thoughts start to go to my safety in a way that they wouldn't if these men weren't Black. And when we dived into this thought experiment a bit more, and I was like, well, in this thought experiment, of course, how are these men dressed? How are they walking? How are they talking? And that ended up being very important factors in how this thought experiment
Absolutely.
went down in their heads and in reality, right? We're talking about real situations here. And that's when you realize that this stuff is intersectional, and it does end up affecting The danger here that people can fall into if they don't take this far enough is the Bill Cosby solution, right? Which is like, oh, the solution is no matter what neighborhood you're from, wear a wool sweater and corduroy pants and stop talking like that and don't call your kids DeAndre or whatever.
Right, exactly.
And that's such a limited ass solution, and because it'll just reform. Like even if everybody was to decide to do that, which would be a terrible thing for a community to do, for a community to give up how it wants to dress and how it wants to express itself, because it would just be it's a soul destroying act in many ways, or could be.
But it's also not only is it a soul destroying act, it misses the point, because as you said, there's something else going on underneath that, and you're asking people to perform and assimilate and perform a mainstream song and dance, and there's fundamentally harmful things there for the people, for that population of people. You also the mainstream culture loses out on the benefit of all of those creative approaches to to style and life choices, and the real problematic stuff that people are noticing and that causes the fear. Yes, it's related to a culture born out of like deprivation, and all the ways that individuals in a deprived community find ways to cope and to deal and to thrive within that horrible space. And so you're talking to something that is real and fundamental, and the Bill Cosby solution isn't it, man. I remember that, and people talk about that now loosely. That's just called respectability politics. And I do like that we've challenged that and have moved on from that, because I think that really was the order of the day for some time. But can I challenge you on something? This is something in the last episode, man. You said something. We were talking about the Robin DiAngelo book, and you were saying how you don't have racist thoughts, and you said that fairly quickly. And as we were editing it, as I was editing it, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't get, I should have asked you a second question and pushed back a bit, because obviously racist thoughts are sort of ephemeral. They come and they go. You don't have control. You have racist thoughts. Jesse, do you not? Are you going to hold to that?
I'm going to hold to it on one respect, which is like relating to what I'm saying, which is that, I grew up in a situation where it was like, I grew up in a multi-ethnic, multiracial neighborhood where you saw people take all forms of like good people, bad people, greedy people, nice people, solidarity minded people. It's like there was too many people of too many different races for you to develop these dangerous stereotypes, I guess, like in some ways. That's not to say that like there's nothing in there, but I think it's always like, I think it's this situation that I was talking about, where it's like race can sometimes contribute to a thought I will get in my head around safety or education or whatever when combined with other things. But I don't think race as a factor by itself. I get ideas in my head like negative stereotypes or negative ideas. I think I grew up in a situation where that didn't help you at all. Like it just like it wasn't useful, like, to look at somebody and say, oh, they're from South Asian descent, that means this and this about them. It's like you'd already been proven wrong 8 times by the end of the day. So it's like so
you're talking to the value of having a multicultural experience, but you were subject to the same media that everyone else is, right? All that, we have this critique of images of the black violent male and black women. So
yeah, absolutely.
That, obviously, yeah.
And there's something freaky about the fact that like Wu-Tang Clan is unbelievably popular in Ivy League campuses. So like Wu-Tang does like regular tours of like Harvard and Yale and shit, and gets like 30,000 wealthy white fans who grew up in all white neighborhoods out there with their like throwing up their Wu signs and all that shit while they talk about how hard it is in the hood and how they had to kill all these people and blah blah blah. All these like Hollywood type songs, about like crazy violence and all this shit, reinforcing some of these stereotypes, right? In some ways, I'm not judging the Wu-Tang Clan for this. I'm just saying this is an interesting situation. I don't know. It's like like everybody's going to be different. Reality is infinitely complex. I was definitely exposed to those things. I never really liked Wu-Tang Clan. I preferred the Tribe Called Quest when they were like, when there was those two movements in hip hop. I was more in like this funky, weird, jazzy kind of hip hop thing. I Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was my favorite show. That wasn't like Will wasn't particularly violent. The opening theme song shows him like refusing to fight these guys at the basketball court and getting spun around on their heads. I mean, like, you know what I mean? It's like he as a character, he challenged a lot of stereotypes, I think. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. The other thing you said, like, the other thing you said, it's you have to take responsibility for your thoughts too. Like, you get that thought, it's on you to work it out in your head. So it's like, I might see a group of black men walking a certain way, dressed a certain way, coming towards me in a night street. I have to, in my head, I might go, oh, they're like more likely, based on all these things my mind's seeing. My mind's going, oh, they're more likely to come from an impoverished community. They might be desperate. They might be whatever. Safety, safety, safety. There's this part of my brain that's going like that. My intellect can take over and say, this is not fair to these guys. Statistically, at least in Canada, they're like still very unlikely, even if they're from the most impoverished community, this is very unlikely that these men are about to do me harm. Like, very unlikely. And it is totally not fair for me to like put this on them. And so, like, you know, I can win the battle over my reptilian security brain, safety brain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's taking these. Just go ahead.
I'm sorry, I cut you off, man.
No, that's it.
No, that's the thing, though, and that's the part you didn't get to, and that's sort of your nature is to be, you're humble in this way. But there's a choice in there. So what you attributed it mostly to your upbringing, like you were just kind of raised in a multicultural place, but that doesn't necessarily result in you being Jesse Freeston, the person that I know.
No, and there's all kinds of people who don't grow up in multi-ethnic, multicultural situations. Like my mom, who grew up in a northern mining town that was all white, and you know, but she's like very, I don't know, she doesn't particularly, you wouldn't know it by talking to her. You might assume she'd grown up in a multi-ethnic community. So it's
what matters are your choices.
Yeah.
What matters is how you manifest whatever ideas come up in your head. And you talked about how the intellect takes over, and I think that's major key. And that's probably why that's definitely why I didn't respond to you, because I'm biased, because I know you and I know what you meant, but that doesn't mean that the viewer does, and I should have pushed back. I appreciate you explaining it further. But I think I think to me the coolest part about the whole story for why you feel that you don't have racist thoughts or that you don't manifest racist thoughts is that you chose frequently. That's the coolest part. Like, you are constantly choosing to be the Jesse that you want to be, and that Jesse does not manifest his biases in a harmful way for people. And that's the goal. I think that's what Robin DiAngelo is trying to do. Even though, you know, I think that's what she's trying to do, and I think that's something we should all aspire to do as we talk about this stuff. As we engage with each other.
My beef with I think the Robin DiAngelo stuff is very important for a certain white person who's at that stage, to help them get beyond it. I think it's missing this key aspect that we've been talking about for the past 10 minutes, which is like the material realities at the basis of this. Like, that the desperation that impoverished communities live in that can result in people not having access to education or not having access to resources and then becoming desperate and then resulting to crime or whatever it might be. I'm trying to think of the line in that song, the Blue song, where the guy's like, if you say that crime don't pay, you never tried it. You work, I work you, the ghetto logic. And like, you know, it's like you can find these lines.
Wait, what was that last line?
You work, and then I work you, the ghetto logic. So it's like you have a paying job or whatever. You worked 8 hours, and then in 2 minutes I'm gonna take all of it from you. Like that kind of thing. So it's like that's an economic model for survival in a desperate situation. And so like if you say that this is all in everybody, like all these conclusions that people arrive at in their head and get these racist thoughts, if you say that's all in your head, and that like we don't address the economic inequalities that are at the base of so much of it,
exactly,
we're not going to get there.
it's a way of not having a full and serious conversation, and it's a way of like dismissing something that is like not just the elephant, it's like the elephant in the room as far as I'm concerned. And it manifests in so many other difficult ways, because then when we see, for instance, you can have a conversation about housing in Washington, D.C. with a black person, a black, like, soon-to-be homeowner, and they speak in similar terms about neighborhoods. You speak, I'm not a homeowner yet. I aspire to be soon, but they speak in similar terms. And if you think it's just like vitriolic racism, rooted in skin and melanin, like racism, and you fail to notice everything that you're talking about the deprivations and the desperation, then you'll be confused. How can black people talk about? Of course they can, because it's not about hating those black people. It's about the conditions that black people are disproportionately living under. And I think that's so key. I think you just got to be honest about that, because then it spills over into what you're describing, people who the images spill over into people who don't come from those neighborhoods. And that's how you can see a black judge, getting detained in front of his home for trying to get into his home. You know what I mean? It's like, it has now those harmful ideas around desperation apply to people who aren't desperate, because it's about that. And I've lost my train again.
Yeah, so another experience I had recently is I decided I was gonna ride my bike as far as I could out of the city and just see how far I got. I ended up like 3 hours out, and I ended up going to this beach in a park. And when I got there was like all kinds of different languages being spoken, all kinds of different music being played from Bluetooth speakers. And I saw a bunch of people like leave their belongings, their purses, their phones, their wallets, unguarded on the beach and go swimming. In a situation where, it's like not everybody here is of the same ethnicity. Like, that's not where the trust is coming from here. And I was like, this is like this. So, but then, I thought about it, I was like, right, I'm pretty far outside the city right now. Everybody who's here drove here, except for me. I'm crazy. I'm on my bike, whatever. Everybody else drove here. And so there's a certain class of people that's not here at this beach right now. And that's part of why this multi-ethnic group at this beach trusts each other enough to leave valuable items unattended, right? And then like the world I want to live in is like a public beach that costs nothing to go to, that's accessible on public transportation, where people speak in a bunch of different languages, dressing a bunch of different ways with a bunch of different skin tones, able to leave their shit unattended and go swimming without any fear that shit's gonna get stolen. And like, until that world exists, I think there's gonna be stereotypes. There's gonna be, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fear that would exist on a beach today can look like a racialized fear. Mm-hmm. It can look like a racist fear. But again, it just speaks to what we're talking about, which is the next level underneath that. And yes, the facts that, again, the deprivation is disproportionately in a certain group. So these groups, I don't know.
But it's worth repeating. It's worth repeating though that this is not an excuse for racist stereotypes. Like no. You're still in a duty to win internally, to win the war, like to win the intellectual war over your reptilian brain that's telling you to be scared right now, or telling you to come up with assumptions about this person, because you still have to treat every individual like an individual.
Reptilian brain?
Yeah, that like fight or flight, like, oh, like, is this person, can I trust this person? Am I safe? Am I not safe? Yeah, that's what I mean by reptilian brain. And like, you still have to win the war in your own head over those thoughts, and say like, no, I have to treat every individual like an individual no matter what. And I can't have those assumptions about this person.
To me, that's an actual legitimate goal that needs to be sought after and chosen every single day, just like a workout goal or a goal for your career or anything like that. It is to get engage with the biases, notice that you have them, engage with them, and do that work to push back against it. And what happens, it just happens when you engage more, you can't help but come up with a nuanced thing, because the notions you have aren't logical, and they're not rooted in experience. Mm-hmm. They're rooted in all kinds of things, and the experiences will work it down. It just does that. That's my experience. Mm-hmm. No, we haven't mentioned, I don't know if you intend to get into reparations. We're pushing that time thing again, but
yeah. Well, let's do it quick, because reparations, I mean, this is another example of a way that these inequalities can be addressed by laws that don't mention actual discrimination in the law, because reparations doesn't have to mention the word black in the law. Reparations is compensation for a crime done to particular people. And so it could happen like it does in the Watchmen series, for anybody who saw that, where you have these centers where you go in and they, through your DNA or whatever, confirm that you're descendant from slaves, and you get the money, or you get whatever compensation is deemed to be appropriate. Yeah. But it might leave out some people, like Billy, for example.
Yeah, I was born in Guadeloupe, man. I was born in a little island in the Caribbean. Came out here to the United States when I was 5. So, that's French citizenship. The question is, would I be eligible? It depends on your description. In my description of what I think an ideal reparative national plan, I would fit in neatly, just like everyone else. Just like we are producing conditions of justice, and so that we can all flourish. We're producing a system where the jails don't look as they do now. We don't just jail people. We're producing a system where that beach that you've described, Jesse, would be something like a reality, writ large, all over the country. We're working hard towards that, and that's what it would be. And there's a whole bunch of policies and programs that would then have to be instituted, obviously, for that goal. But yeah, it's a difficult question. I think that's part of, like, if we take seriously these questions, you'll find out that they get difficult. And so there are different other plans. There's people are talking about reparations in the form of a cash payment plan, a kind of a check. But then, who gets that and how? There's a military model of reparations that some people have proposed. It's a kind of a GI Bill, tuition and tuition for colleges and a housing allowance that we afford to our military vets, and so many others. But I'm really interested in the idea of just creating that the baseline of justice. We'd see a much better country, if you ask me, much better, because you just.
So what do you think? What on this front? This is the question I want to end with: is what should the next RBG be looking to do? What's the next move for somebody in terms of, like, what are the rights that should be guaranteed? What's the next big legal project for you?
The next big legal project.
What would ideally, if you could take it anywhere?
My pet project has to do with national education. It's funny because things have changed so much, and in terms of the workforce and our understanding of how, what a worker looks like, and what are the next industries for growth, and where people can be employed and fruitfully compensated. But I will say that with all of the reforms that have occurred in this country, we've lagged so poorly on making sure that everyone is provided like a really competent and proper, useful and fulfilling and enriching education experience, where they are imbued with some real curiosity and excitement to learn and to perform and do whatever it is that they choose to do. We failed so bad on that, and it's led to a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. And so that's my bias. That's where I want to go. I don't know what that looks like. I am not an education policy expert, but right.
But new
But I wanna
technologies
see
and
that.
stuff make for incredible possibilities. Like it would be an interesting time to put some real creative people with values in charge of designing a new education system. Yeah.
It's also a scary
be
time
really
because
exciting.
we've got Donald Trump trying to do his a re-education program that is, I forgot what he called it, man. But the whole point is very pro-America education, like openly, consciously seeking to do that. This is going to be an interesting battle among so many other battles.
Don't you guys already have that? It sounds
Exactly.
It sounds like every time I talk to people about the education they got in the U.S. I mean, we have a pro Canada one. We have some. I think most nations probably do that.
Sure.
Okay, my goal for the next RBG, where I think they should take it, and this is coming from my perspective of like, I'm just going to talk about what's morally right, not what's possible, not what's pragmatic. I want to see people start, like, I'm going to start putting this out there and start building the idea of something that's morally right and make it practical over time. This is the long-term project. The extension of U.S. citizenship to all of the Western Hemisphere. Or U.S. citizenship rights. Like I have no idea what this actually ends up looking like, but something along these lines. Like, Honduran people have not ever had independence, right? Like, they live in an empire. The U.S. embassy decides what happens in their country. When something happens that the U.S. embassy doesn't like, there's a coup d'etat and the government's overthrown. They're living under a coup government right now. And this is the story of Latin America. Every country. Maybe with the exception of Cuba. But Cuba's under a blockade. So it's like and I think this is interesting because this is the question of who's a citizen and who has the rights of a citizen in an empire is one of the things that caused the fall of the Roman Republic. Just to do a quick little history recap, is that the Roman army was recruiting soldiers outside of Rome for its military campaigns, and then was promising them land and blah blah blah, and then integrating them into the thing, but then they wouldn't have voting rights. So you'd have these land owning people that were not ethnically Roman, and now they're landowners inside the Roman Empire, which according to the concept of Rome, these landowning men should now be able to vote on who's in the Senate and all this stuff. And there was a divide on that, and Julius Caesar took the side of yes, they should have voting rights. He was probably had his own reasons to do it as somebody who was leading these military campaigns and had his name out there in these places, had fought with these men. He had their allegiance probably, so he had his own probably personally ambitious reasons for why he supported them having the right to vote. And this was like the political divide that led to Julius Caesar taking the military and doing a coup d'etat basically, and ending the Roman Republic and having it become a dictatorship. And so that's an interesting little history lesson. So like this question, I mean, like, you could imagine if some left-leaning Democrat was to hit the legislature, hit the Congress today and say, I'm putting forward HR 417 to give U.S. citizenship to everybody born or living in the Western Hemisphere. Like,
Wouldn't happen.
It'd be so insane. But there is like a serious moral argument for that. That these people are governed. In many ways, their president is the president of the United States. In many ways. And so they should get to vote. It would be interesting to see. I just want the exercise of having a brilliant legal mind, a constitutional scholar who knows their history of the Western Hemisphere, and it probably would. And this is the thing: it probably wouldn't end at the Western Hemisphere. It would probably then go to all the coups and all the shit. That
I was going to ask you how that goes, but I mean you're talking about.
But let's start with the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah. Okay.
And And I would just love to see how a constitutional legal mind would make, like an RBG, would make the argument for why Colombians and Haitians should be considered should get the rights of U.S. citizens. I think that would be fascinating.
That's interesting. I'm not mad at that. But that's a long project. You said that at the outset. You at the same time, the question was, I think, like,
looking
what's the
for
next?
help? Looking for help on this one. We're hiring.
The question I think was, what's the next RGB move? But I think your answer was way down the line, and I appreciate that. That's
like like a big frontier. Like for me, this is like a big frontier.
Yeah.
And people who oppose it, it's like, well, then end the empire. You know, stop having so much influence on the politics of these places, and stop with the military. You know, to take home all these 700 and something U.S. bases that are all over the world. Close those bases. You know, like, or give those people rights.
Right.
Within the empire, acknowledge you're an empire first. You know, and then decide whether you're going to keep. If
So many things to unpack, Jess.
Then give these people rights. If you're going to keep the empire, then give these people rights. If you don't want to give them rights, then go home.
Yeah, lots to unpack there. First off, we're not an empire. I don't know what you're talking about. So it's like that, you know, right there. That's how the conversation goes. We have a lot, and this is why things do need progress. If that's the long-term vision, there's many steps that need to go before we get there. And it's good to focus and be very deliberate in a way that it seems that RBG attempted to say, okay, I'm going to do this, and she probably built a ton of confidence by noticing how the court worked here and the work she did with the ACLU, and developed a strategy for all the successes she had.
Mm-hmm. Man, I think we made it.
You think we made it?
I think we made it to the end of the episode.
Really? We're not gonna do the study of the saints? What is that about? Or did we cover that already?
Oh wait, we could just end with that.
Okay, great.
It's like, so one of the great things about the Where Is Now podcast is we do not do this word that I've learned recently, which is called hagiography, which is the study of the saints. One of the things I looked at preparing for this episode was the documentary RBG, which really felt like that. Like the tone of it is just, from the beginning, we acknowledge that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is absolutely amazing, you know. And it's like, and you can see in all these little ways, just like how, you know, they have all these clips where she says things that are like maybe moderately funny and gets these massive eruptions of laughter and applause from the crowd. And you know, and like the music choices and blah blah blah. And I hate this shit. I'm like, it's like I hate it in the same way that like most horror movies I don't like, because the music starts telling me I should be scared.
Yeah.
Before I have any reason to be scared. And it's like, listen, I have no doubt that there's somebody with an axe out there who's about to kill him, but let me find that out with my own eyes, you know, and before you tell me that they're coming with this violin thing. And I feel that way about when people talk about people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, where it's just this overwhelming romantic thing that happens in the storytelling about people like this. We don't do that shit, and right?
No, we don't. There's a real tendency towards what you said, and I think that we would do a great job, not we and you and me, but as a species, we do a great job to kind of pull away from that, deifying people, and really focus on the very human choices that they make. Every day, these people are making very human choices, and they're choices that others of us can relate. Yeah, we can make them as well. And that's the difference. That's the whole difference.
That's the problem with treating them like saints.
Exactly.
You treat them like saints, and then they die, and you go, "We're fucked."
Exactly.
You know, the saint died. We're done.
There's
Whereas
a way
if you treat them as a potential model, as a human that you can try to be like, well, then it's like, oh, they're dead. Okay, that's cool. We've been studying her and her life. She doesn't, as to use a term they use in Latin America, you know, she didn't just die. She was planted, and she's going to produce seeds. And the only way that happens is if people actually approach her as a model and try to take something from it. Maybe not all of it. Hopefully not all of it. You know, hopefully just the best parts. And that's what we're about. That's why this podcast exists, right?
Yeah, I think so. That's why we keep, you know, bringing these people and trying to talk about. I find that we keep doing that sort of intuitively. I don't know if we plan to do this, but we're really oriented in in the choices and like trying to humanize it.
Oh, can you hear that? This is
that the music playing?
This is Cardova by the Meters. Great
Nice.
track. Yeah, I don't want anybody thinking I know up until now Billy and I have been making the tracks, but I don't want to take credit for this one. I can't play the bass like that. I can't play the bass period.
Wait, do you make your beats with actual instruments?
No, I don't even actually make one.
I hope not. Okay, okay, good. Because I just drag and drop stuff on the thing.
I don't have the Google skills to find a bass lick like that.
There you go.
Like whatever the name is of the bassist for the Meters. Yeah, man, this was a pleasure. I hope our words are received with the love that I think we're putting into them.
Hope so too.
Much love, and let's keep moving forward. And anybody out there, if you want to hit us up with some feedback, we are at whereisnowshow@gmail.com if you want to send an email, or reach out to Billy or I. You can check out our information in the show notes and the description. Yeah, we'll keep on keeping on.
There it is, man. Jesse, kid luck with the rest of your quarantine and the work that you're doing. And I can't wait to see it. Thank you very much, dude.
Thanks, man.
Peace!